All right, Exodus 39, let's call this one extra, which is a slang or colloquial term for trying to do too much, which is actually another slang term for going overboard or trying to make too big a demonstration or doing too much or extra stuff just to prove a point or be seen or whatever. And that reminded me of Exodus 39 as I was struggling to find a practical application of this chapter that is basically just describing the priest's clothes. It eventually just kind of seemed to stand out to me that the priest's clothes were kind of extra, especially when you get to the description of the high priest's clothes around verse 30 of chapter 39, where it says, they made the plate of the holy crown of pure gold and wrote on it an inscription, like the engraving of a signet, holy to the Lord. And they tied it to a cord of blue to fasten it on the turban above, as the Lord had commanded Moses. This points back in a lot of ways to the first description that we got, or at least the prior description that we got of the priest's garments in Exodus 28. But the whole extra part struck me in this way. Do you think it would be kind of odd having to be a priest walking around in the nation in gear that was clearly not only setting you apart and making you stand out, but making you stand out, especially in the case of the high priest, in an extra way? How much worse to people who were from outside the nation, who did not necessarily find themselves familiar with the forms and customs of Israel, and now understand for us practically nowadays the word Christian, or the name Christian. It has some places where it might fit, but that's not necessarily everywhere. And so sometimes just being called a Christian can make you seem like you are kind of extra to the point where you don't even want to be known that way at all. And so that is where Exodus 39 seemed to connect to where we live right here, right now, wherever you are at. It's because we have the responsibility to the degree that we are actually believers. Or if we're curious, but one of the things we don't really want to have to take on is the stigma of wearing that name, even though we might share some of those beliefs, is in life. That's just part of growing up. It is understanding that there are times when wearing a name that can bring shame brings responsibility. Look at it like this. In the days of Solomon, one of their later kings, Israel rose to the level of becoming one of the preeminent nations on the globe, it would seem, as it's described biblically. It is at least described this way. He was a man leading a nation that was prospering to the point where people were coming from far and wide to get his wisdom and insight. And in a nation that successful, how weird do you think those priestly garments might have seemed when Israel was now a trendsetter and no longer just a group of people walking circles in the wilderness? Understand what that means for you. There are plenty of people who have achieved to a level where they don't have to hang their heads about being a Christian, even though they probably still feel the pressure in certain environments. I think of brothers I know in the church, I'm not going to name drop, but they're doing some major things and they don't have to hang their head about being a Christian at all. They don't. I think back to men like Reggie White. Back in the day, they called him the minister of defense on the football field, one of the best football players of his age before he passed, unashamed to be a believer. Evander Holyfield beating a man people thought was invincible, relatively invincible at the time, Mike Tyson, and he wasn't ashamed to be called a believer. Likewise, I talk much of Steph Curry. All of these people demonstrate an excellence that allows them to raise their head, and that means that in wearing the name Christian, one of the reasons why you want to wear it is because it sets a responsibility that requires you to step your game up in whatever gift you've had. We said it before, everybody has a gift. Not everybody has a gift that's going to make them prosperous. The gifts that Paul writes are going to endure are simply faith, hope, and love. And we live in a world that lacks love. And so while we are often tempted to chase the more attractive gifts, the ones that matter are the ones that can help people from committing suicide, lingering in depression, or just feeling lost and alone. And so to the degree you can be excellent in that, you need to wear the name Christian because it says, I am the kind of person who, if I'm not being that kind of encouragement now, that's what I should be. And so just like we talked about accountability in previous chapters, being a Christian is a selfless demonstration that says, even though it may cause me shame, God willing, I am the kind of person who's striving to be the kind of person you can trust. So even if I have to tell you an unpopular truth, I can do it in love so that we can all grow to be the kinds of people that we need to be. God's best to you as you go forward in him.